So I'm gonna start off with number 1. Maybe I get this out of here. So, I'm gonna put a line in here. Lena, please put your phone away. Now I'm going to isolate x squared. Isolate the squared term. Whatever is squared needs to be all alone. So first thing I would do is cancel out that 240 at subtraction, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. Then I would cancel out 3 times x squared. The opposite of times is divide. That's 80. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So that's 80. Oh, yeah. The square root of 80. The square root of 81 is 9. So this is probably like 8.9. We're going to square root it. We're not going to go to decimal form. I'm going to put the square root bar in. And that's going to give me x is plus or minus the square root of 80, which again is like 8.9. It's a decimal. These directions say no decimals. So what do we do to simplify this radical? We need to split it. So I'm going to use the list. And I'm going to use, I guess here I might want a calculator, Christian, but can you think of any numbers that square root that 80 can be divided by? Like 4 is there, but I feel like maybe there's a higher one. So I think of 8, but 8 doesn't square root, but maybe 16 is a possibility. There's 8 and 10, but 10 isn't a square rooted number. The square root numbers are 1, 4 square root, 9 square root, 16 square roots. Does 80 divides by 4, 80 divides by 8. There's a good chance 80 divides by 16 does it. It does 5. 5 times 16 is 80. So I'm going to rewrite 80. It's 16 times 5. That's the same thing as 80. And the square root of 16 is 4. So I still got the plus or minus sign. I still got x equals. 5 doesn't square root. There's nothing that 5 can divide by that square root. So that's where I stop my answer. So there's 2 ways that you have to answer these. Sometimes it's like this, simplest radical form, and sometimes it's the decimal, which would have been 8.9. Number 2 tends to be more difficult. Two tends to be more difficult, but it's the same standard, it's the same content. Alright, so I guess I'll just jump right into this. Number 2. Number 2, this whole thing is squared. There's nothing that's not squared over on the right side of the equal sign. So I need to cancel out this 2. We need to cancel out that little 2. To cancel it, I'm going to put a great big square root bar on both sides. The radical and the exponent are canceling each other. X minus 5 equals plus or minus. Do y'all know the square root of 10? I said the answer. The square root of 100 is 10. 15 is going to be one of our answers. There's 2 of them. We need to add 5 over, and it goes right there. So this is 5 plus or minus 10. So this is where we would separate it. It's 5 plus 10, or it's 5 minus 10. So it's 15, or just like JC said, it's negative 5. 2 answers because parabola has 2 x-intercepts. Anything x squared is a parabola. Anything where the problem is x, but it has an exponent of 2, a polynomial degree 2, they're all parabolas. It does. There are 2 answers there. It's just not written out twice. I could say x is positive 4 square root 5, or x is negative 4 square root 5. It's 2. The positive or the negative. That's because this is x squared, just Travis, don't do that. This is just x squared, and this has the minus 5 that's squared as well. That's going to cause 2 way different answers, whereas just x squared is the same thing, positive, negative. Good stuff. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Those are patterns you don't pick up on for time. All right, so this is what we worked on last week, right here in these 2 problems. Mm-hmm. As a fraction, you mean? You mean like in number 1 or number 2? Like, are you talking about the square root of 13, like that? Yeah, that just stays square root of 13. There's nothing that can, unless it asks you to round, and then you'd put it in a calculator and you'd write the decimal. It just stays just like that. Unless they say round, you make it a decimal and you add the 4. Yes. No. There's one more thing we're going to do today. We're starting chapter 9.5 today. Is this our last chapter? Well, chapter 10 is data. So it's like pie charts, circle graphs, tables, histograms. It's a whole different vibe. More statistics. People normally like it. People normally find it better than this. It's generally easier. I don't want to say that because it's not going to be easier for everybody, but generally easier. Okay. All right, so sometimes you have to solve a quadratic that cannot be square rooted. So let's do a few notes here. This is the last section in chapter 9 that we'll be covering. And this is when you have a quadratic that you can't do the process we just did. It doesn't work. The mathematicians came up with an amazing formula, and they rightfully called it the quadratic formula. The great news is you don't have to memorize it. On your formula sheet for your exam, you'll see this formula on there. Okay? So you don't have to memorize it, but you have to understand when it's useful and how to use it. No need to memorize it. Let me write that down. Yes? We do use this. You use this in every level of math above Algebra 1. This is done in every level of math in Algebra 1. In Algebra 2, they're taking a test today, and they have to do like 8 steps. Then they finish it with this. This is the last step out of 8. Yeah, it's like, yes. So this actually becomes really useful. You get good at it. And actually, in Algebra 2, the calculator they use, this is the programmed in it. On the SAT, you're allowed to use a calculator that has this programmed in it. You just have to understand when it's useful and how to use the calculator. Now, for someone, for instance, if you're getting A's and B's in this class and on tests, then you're going to go to honors geometry, junior year honors algebra 2, and then senior year you could take ACE math. Those students probably just always do it by hand. They should have the skills to not rely on a calculator. And then you guys are doing it by hand, but your numbers are just a little more simple than algebra 2 numbers. I don't want to call this simple, but I'm just saying as you go through, there's little tips and tricks to it. No, not simple. Anyway, our first example here, x squared minus 2x minus 15. It can't be solved doing what we just did. So instead, we'll use the formula. So once I'm sure everybody has it written down, we'll watch a video. This is the problem that we're going to solve using the quadratic formula. Alright, how do we plug in and simplify this formula? What? We're going to solve this. We're going to find out what the x-intercepts are, find out what x equals. Number 1 here. It can't. So instead, we're going to plug it into this formula and let the formula solve it. If we could use the methods we just did, that's actually easier. We would do that, but this, you can't. Well, we haven't even tried it yet, so let's give it a try. We'll do 3 problems for classwork, and then you'll have some work on it. ABC, yeah. ABC.
So now we fill the numbers into this equation down here.
Yeah. She's already onto it. All right, here we go. I'm going to start the first video. We're not gonna watch the whole 10 minutes. We're not gonna watch the whole 10 minutes. We'll see. I mean,
Okay, so in this video, we want to understand the quadratic formula. Let's see if we can do it in a
I'm supposed to record 5 minutes in this guy really gets over it. This link is in Schoology if you want to watch it like on your own.
Hey, Sarasota and Manatee. Arctic Air Home Services are AC and plumbing experts. We're there when you need.
Now, let's go ahead and look at some coefficients of this polynomial. So x squared is actually technically a 1 there. This is 1x squared minus 2x minus 15. So this guy we're going to give a specific, assign a specific variable to, and this guy here, and this one over here, okay? So the number in front of the x squared in the equation is a, okay? So this is a is equal to 1, all right? This, the number in front of the x term is b, so b is equal to negative 2, and then the number itself is c, so c is equal to negative 15, and you make sure you get those signs in there as well, whether they're positive or negative. So a general form to use a quadratic formula is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So if you have a polynomial equation in its general form, the number in front of the x is a, the number in front of the, the number in front of the x squared is a, the number in front of the x is b, and then the number out here by itself is c. Okay, so you can see that in this particular example. Okay, so now that we have our values for these variables, a, b, and c, we simply plug them into the quadratic formula, and we're going to go ahead and find our two solutions. Now, a lot of you out there probably already understand this part. As a math teacher of decades, I've seen thousands, tens of thousands of problems, students doing the quadratic formula. You pick up on common mistakes, common trends. So I'm going to really try to point them out to you so you don't make these common errors. So let's go ahead and continue on with this problem, and I'll point out these common trends here in a second. All right, so when we plug things in to the quadratic formula, we've got to be super careful. So this is like the first place where students make a mistake. They understand the A, B, C part, but they plug things in not correctly into the formula. But let's go ahead and do it now. So we have x is equal to minus b. So b is negative 2. Here, I'll go ahead and put little boxes around them. Okay, a is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 2, and c is equal to negative 15. And specifically where students mess up is when you have negative signs with these values, they get confused here. So the best thing to do is to use parentheses. So x is equal to minus b, so just put the minus sign there, and b is equal to negative 2. So you need to put parentheses negative 2. Your b value is negative 2, so plug that in. So anytime you're replacing this variable with the value, use parentheses, and that's just a good general rule to follow in algebra, okay, when you evaluate expressions. So we have minus b, okay, so that's going to be minus and minus 2, plus or minus, and I'll get into what the plus or minus means as we work through this problem. The square root of b squared, again, it's going to be minus 2, that's b, squared, minus 4 times a here is 1, right? I'm just following the formula, and c is negative 15. So I'm using parentheses to plug in these values. And notice my square root goes all the way over the b squared minus 4ac part. And this is all going to be divided, one big long fraction bar, by 2a. So that's going to be 2 times the value of a, when that is 1 in this case. All right, once you've done this, you want to double check your work, okay? A lot of students, they'll plug in the wrong values, and then they'll do that part correctly. They'll do it as if they plugged in, like they're doing another problem, they did it perfectly. The only problem is they plugged in the wrong value. So don't start simplifying the math here until you double check, okay? So in other words, just kind of quickly look, okay, is that b squared? Just double check that you plugged everything in correctly. If you've, once you've done that and you feel good about it, now we're going to go ahead and do the math here, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab this and kind of scoot this into the center so we can work a little bit better. All right, now.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Big Wireless has once again raised their prices. In response, we're bringing back our deflation promotion. The marketing department asked me to be a success.
Now, this is basically now an order of operations problem. You need to go nice and slow, step by step, and you should be writing the steps down. Don't try to calculate all of this in one step, okay? So I'll go ahead and show you. So you're just going to rewrite this. X equals minus 2 is what? That's positive 2, right? The opposite of negative 2 is 2. So that's going to be 2 plus or minus, and let me just stop here. If you didn't understand this, that means you need to go back and work on your positive, negative number rules, real number rules, okay? So again, as I'm doing this, you don't understand something, you're probably having trouble with the quadratic formula, not because of the formula itself, it's because you need to review your positive, negative number rules or fractions or whatnot. Okay, so let's continue on. So negative of negative 2 is positive 2 plus or minus the square root. And just kind of work this down one at a time, okay? So negative 2 parentheses squared means this. That's a negative 2. Negative 2 squared means negative 2 times negative 2. So that is going to be equal to a positive 4. All right, so I'm going to write that right here. Minus 4 times 1, okay, times a negative 15. So I'm just kind of writing this out like this, okay? I haven't done any more steps here. All over 2 times 1, and that's 2. So I'm just kind of simplifying 1 or 2 steps at most per line that I'm writing, okay? Now, let's continue to move forward. So x equals 2, I'm just rewriting this again, okay, there's nothing here I can do yet, but I have to rewrite it. 2 plus or minus the square root of 4. Now, what I'm going to focus on is this part right here. And this is another very common place where students mess up, okay? So I'm going to give you a little technique, a little tip here on how to avoid this. Students they'll confuse the signs, they'll get this wrong, okay? Again, many students who do get these problems wrong get them wrong. They make them an error right here. So 4 minus, it's going to be 4 minus 4ac, or 4 times 1 times negative 15. This minus sign, do yourself a favor, turn it into a plus negative, because this is really a negative 4, plus negative 4. So b squared minus 4ac, this is the part in our formula. It really means, or you can think of it as b squared plus a negative 4 times a times c, okay? And students invariably, they get this problem wrong. They more than 50% of the time, they make an error right here. Okay, so what I always suggest to students, if you're making that mistake, if you get confused, just turn this into a plus negative 4. So now we have plus negative 4 times 1 times negative 15. And just really kind of focus on what's going on here. So now I have 4 plus, let me kind of back up here, and we have to figure out what negative 4 times 1 times negative 15 is. So this is going to be a negative times a positive, which is negative. So a negative times a negative. This whole thing is going to be positive here. And it's going to be a positive 60. Okay? Now that's going to be all over 2. Okay, which was 2 times 1. So it's just 2. So now we're kind of getting there. Things are we're kind of past some of the more common mistakes. The big things here the students make a mistake on is they plug in incorrectly, okay, because they get confused with the negative numbers, and then they also make a mistake with the b squared minus 4ac, okay, this part right here, all right? Now, let's continue to move on here. Now, kind of work sideways. This is equivalent to 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 60, and that's 64 all over 2. And this problem is going to be finished up here pretty quickly. Let me scoot this down. All right, now, kind of put it here.
Could this invention end expensive trips to the eye doctor? These revolutionary self-adjustable glasses are taking the world by storm. They let you achieve a sharp 20/20 vision at any distance, which means you won't.
All right, so x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 64. So the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, it's technically plus or minus 8, and that's why you have the plus or minus here. Okay, so 2, the square root of 64 is 8, plus or minus 8 all over 2. Think about it. 64 is 8, positive 8 times a positive 8 is 64. However, negative 8 times negative 8 is also a positive 64. So your answer is both plus or minus. So the square root of 64 is both a positive and negative 8. Now, being that the square root of any real number, positive real number is going to be plus or minus, it's already built into the formula. That's why you have that plus or minus there. Okay? So I'm going to erase that. I just wanted to point that out to you. Remember, when you're doing math, like let's say the quadratic formula, if you really understand how to do one problem, then you should be okay doing multiple problems. So I'm really pointing out things here nice and slow so you can really kind of master this. And of course, we want to try to do this in 10 minutes, and I'm sure I'm probably a little bit over that right now, but who cares? By the time you get done watching this video, you'll be a quadratic equations formula expert. All right, let's finish this thing up. So we got 2 plus or minus 8 over 2. So what do we do at this point? Well, this plus or minus here is critical. This is how we're going to get our two solutions. Remember, we kind of go up here real quick. When I talked about the theory of polynomials, x squared, there's two solutions. You always get two answers with the quadratic formula. Always, always, always. If you don't, you're doing something wrong. Now, this plus or minus is how you're going to get it. Okay. So what this means, and we want to break it out this way, is the following. We want to write this as 2 plus 8. We'll do the plus here, 2 plus 8 over 2, and then we'll do the 2 minus 8 here. Okay, over 2. So we have a plus 8 and a minus 8. We're not going to write it all out. Typically, we'll just write this as plus or minus 8. But at the end of this problem, you have to write out, you actually have to do each calculation separately. Okay, and this is how you're going to get your two answers. So you have 2 plus 8 is 10, obviously, divided by 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, so that is one solution. All right, and then over here, I have 2 minus 8 is negative 6 divided by 2, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and that's my second solution. Okay, sometimes you'll see this written as x1 being 5 and x2 being negative 3. Okay, so you can even write this out this way. X1.
Okay, so that's the longest video. The other teachers will speed up here or there, but to start out going slow was important. Does anybody need me to rewind anywhere, or does anybody have a question? Yes. He kind of glanced over the number 60, but that's just 4 times 15. Yeah, this is part of the test writing. Yes, you don't have to memorize this. You're given that. This is all we're working on this week. Well, we talk about just this a lot. Call it discriminant. All right, let's try another one. Okay, here's number 2. We're going to do the formula again, and our equation is 2x squared plus 3x minus 2. Not that one. So write your problem down, and we'll hear somebody else go through the process. Yeah. It's quite a bit shorter. You can. I'm gonna start it. Do you guys want a minute to plug in on your own? Okay, I'll wait. Try. Make a list of A, B, C. Good. Do you want to try to plug in another time?
Yeah. In this video, we're going to talk about how to solve quadratic equation.
Are you all ready to see it, or you want more time? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get it rolling. You guys can keep working on your own or just look up. You know, I was gonna talk about it for a while.
Using the quadratic formula. So let's start with this one. Let's say we have the equation 2x squared plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. And our goal is to solve for x. We want to calculate the value of x that makes this equation true. So here is the quadratic formula that we need to use. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now we need to know what a, b, and c are equal to. So in this format, where you have all of the x variables to the left and 0 on the right, a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the constant term. So this is going to be, I'm going to rewrite it here, x is equal to negative b is positive 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 3 squared minus 4 times a is 2, times c, which is negative 2, all divided by 2a, or 2 times 2. So we have negative 3 plus or minus the square root. 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. On the bottom, we have 2 times 2, which is 4. Now, 9 plus 16 is 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. So right now, that's what we have. Notice the plus and
Okay. Anybody have a question about? I'll let you look at it for a minute. The 16 is the most difficult number to get right. That 4 times 2 times 2 is the most difficult part to get right. And the other guy said to do plus a negative 4 times 2 times negative 2 instead of minus. So that would be plus -8 times -2, which would make it plus 16. The 16 is the most difficult part.